Why Kamala? Let's just deal with that one now, shall we? Why Kamala? Because, we were hearing a week ago, Susan Rice, and you've also heard of, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and there were some other names. I think Karen Bass, right? There are other names in the mix. And, we go with Kamala, which is interesting because she was already found insufficient by the Democrat base in the primary. Couldn't even make it to the first round of primary votes. They didn't want her. They didn't want her to be president. And now she's going to kind of be president through the back door of being a vice president for a guy who everyone knows can't actually be president for 8 years, can't really be president for 4 years. I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't make outlandish predictions. I thought Hillary was going to win in 2016. Thank God I was wrong. I don't make outlandish predictions. That was such a happy day, but it was a happy day of shock. It was kind of like when Trump won the election. For me, it felt like if somebody wins the lottery and instead of like dancing and crying with joy, they actually just pass out. It was such a what? It was such a shock. And a lot of you are like, I told you, Buck. I told you for 6 months before. I know there were I really should go through one day and all the emails, all the messages I got from the Team Buck faithful who were like, Trump's going to do it, man. Trump's going to do it. A lot of you saw it. And I to this day, I give you all credit for it. I don't make outlandish predictions, what I'm trying to say. And I admit when I'm right. I admit when I'm wrong. I don't think Biden if he becomes president, I don't think he makes it through the midterms without stepping down for personal health reasons. And why would that be? How is that a bad look? How is that a bad situation? Because wouldn't you rather have incumbent Kamala, right? She becomes the incumbent then. She steps up, takes the job, running for her first term with 2 years, with all the money around her, all this stuff put together, right? Isn't that better? Doesn't it make sense? You get to be Joe Biden. You get to go down into history if you're Joe Biden and you do that as the guy who was the vice to the first black president for 8 years and then the bridge for the first minority female president for 8 years, 4 years, 8 years, whatever it will end up being, right? And if you're Joe Biden, what could be that legacy alone? I mean, the Biden's heirs are going to be swimming in vaults of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. They're going to be so rich. The Democrat apparatus, Dr. Jill Biden. Okay, you guys you're allowed to disagree with me on this. I'm sorry. A PhD in education does not mean I'm going to call you doctor. Right? It is Jill Biden. I'm happy that she spent a lot of years getting a PhD in education. It's not even like a PhD in mathematics or something. A PhD in education? Right now, I've got a bunch of masters and PhD students in education going, click. Gonna turn on Alex Jones. Alex Jones respects a PhD in education, respects it. Unlike Buck Sexton. Buck Sexton's smug. I've seen that face before, smug face. Yeah, look, he's a lunatic, but he is quite a quite a show, that's for sure. Oh man, I'll arm wrestle him. Oh yeah, we'll see who wins. You versus me. Let's go. Where was I? I went off into crazy land there for a second. Oh yes, Kamala and how she becomes. So I think that Biden really does step down. Telling this right now, steps down in the midterms. And I did get the Kamala prediction right, stretching back for a long time. But that's not a tough, and that was almost a coin flip. It was going to be Kamala no, it was like 4 or 5 candidates. But I knew it was going to be Kamala because the media, the apparatus loves her so much. And there's so much Obama nostalgia. So much Obama nostalgia. And I also think it's interesting the way that we're going to be describing, because the Democrat Party, you have with Obama the first black president, right? That's he has that historic title. This is not a criticism. I'm actually curious about this. We're going to refer to Kamala Harris as the first black female president. Shouldn't she also be referred to as the first Indian female president? What, and I mean this, I just wonder how in an identity politics world, how is that So is the media just going to pick one that they think is more powerful for the narrative because she's as Indian as she is black, right? So how does that work? I wonder if they're actually going to go with some kind of an identity, a new term. I don't know, but to call her just the first black president and not to make mention of the fact that she would, I think that's again. This is not a criticism. It's just, I think through this, and it is noteworthy to me that they're so comfortable. I've never heard her called the first. I've heard plenty of people say she'd be the first black female president. I've heard nobody say, except for Mindy Kaling, to be fair, in an interview, that she would be, or no, she didn't call her the first Indian American female president. She said she's, South Asian as a politician, I think. I forget the context of the interview. But no one ever says the first Indian American female president, and I think that's interesting. Why shouldn't that also be in the discussion? Indian Americans are a wonderful part of our American family. I don't know. I just think it's interesting that's we're always hearing the one and we don't hear the other. But again, not a criticism, just a note of interest to me. But why Kamala Harris? Going back into that, why Kamala Harris? Well,
if you listen to Nancy Pelosi, she's like the best. She's the best. The best.
Play 11.
Kamala Harris is not only the choice as a woman of color, she is the best person that Joe Biden could name. There are many people who would do no harm. There are many people who could be president. But to have those two combined with the person he had the comfort level with to serve, it's about governance, as your commentator said. It's about governance. So let's recognize her not only as the first woman of color to be vice president, but the best possible person he could have chosen to proceed into this election and, of course, to win and serve the American people.
A lot of focus on the identity politics stuff there. Why is she the best choice? Let's look at this really, we can actually have a real conversation. What makes Kamala Harris the best choice? It's really that people like Pelosi like her. They stylistically, culturally like her, right? Wall Street likes her. The tech oligarchs like her. The liberal elites are very pro, and journos, of course, because journos are the poorly paid, generally speaking, the poorly paid cousins of the liberal elites, right? Journos are, they're the kind of hangers on to the liberal elite because they're all, unless they've got trust funds or something, they're generally not making the kind of money that Wall Street bankers and tech oligarchs are. But there's not a focus on what is it that Kamala Harris brings, what vision, what policy. We don't even know. I don't even know what Kamala Harris brings to this. And I think it's worth noting that in the last election cycle, it was very clear that here's an experiment before I say anything. I really just, and be honest with yourself, because I can't, this is like a test where I'm not going to grade or it's like homework where I'm not going to grade it, but I'm going to collect it. Remember when they used to do that to you in math class? I hated that. I'm not going to give you a grade, but we're going to check it. And then I'd get all this red ink all over my math homework. I still have nightmares about math class. The only thing in school that ever was not my thing. Anyway, but think about this. Ready for it? Who was Hillary Clinton's vice president? Oh, I know. You probably got it, right? You remember, but come on now. I would bet, no, we'll never be able to check this. Oh, Producer Mark, I'd ask you. When I asked that, I'm sure you know who it was, but how long did it take you about 3 seconds to think that one through and remember?
Honestly, I had no clue until this morning when I was doing show prep.
See, one thing I will say, Producer Mark is rock solid honest always, which I love. Okay, so thank you, Producer. But no,
I mean, I'm sure if I would have thought about it, I would have remembered.
No, of course. But see, my point in this is not, it is that even for me, I work in, this is all I do all the time, Mark, right? And I would have to think for about 3 or 4, like I'd have to go, but wait, who was her vice president? You don't remember? Right? And that was part of it, right? That was part of it. Kellyanne Conway points this out. Play 17.
Senator Harris cannot cure the flaws and the inadequacies at the top of the ticket. She can't do that. And I'd imagine that she is going to receive advice on how to go out there and run through the tape and campaign hard, but don't overshadow Vice President Biden, which is so easy to do. He's overshadowed basically by almost everyone he comes in contact with. I gave him credit for doing something Hillary Clinton didn't do. Hillary Clinton picked one of the 5 people in the country who could not overshadow her. There weren't that many. She picked Tim Kaine, and people are struggling even this week to remember who she had chosen as her running mate.
I think that's absolutely true. Tim Kaine, if I buzzed in on who was in jeopardy, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016, I did know the answer, but I'm not sure I would be able to I'm not sure that I'd get it out before I'm not sure I'd be able to do it. So anyway, Mark, don't feel at all at all put off by it, man. I had to go, oh, that's right, it was Tim Kaine. You go back and you think this stuff through. Here's another fun one. Who was you got to be honest, who was running as vice president for John Kerry, right? Think about this. Vice presidents are not people who you generally think it was John Edwards. John Edwards. I'm going to tell you this. I actually had to check to make sure I hadn't forgotten that one in real time. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning when you think back to how challenging it is to remember who some of these candidates are. But there's a reason I'm going through this. Yeah, that's right. John Edwards, the guy who was like paying off the lady who sells wind chimes or whatever because she had his baby during the campaign. And he said he didn't cheat on his wife who was dying of cancer until she was in remission. I mean, folks, that guy, you want to talk about slimy, John Edwards. Wow. Right. He is wow level of slimy. And don't ever forget this, who broke the story of John Edwards, the philandering slimeball? The National Enquirer. The rest of the entire journalistic establishment, no idea, and they fought against it. They pretended it wasn't true. The National Enquirer broke that story. Pretty amazing. All true. Kamala clearly does overshadow Joe Biden in the minds of the liberal elites, but here's the issue. They, in my opinion, I guess everything's in my opinion because it's my show, but as you look at this ticket, Kamala Harris is supposed to overshadow Biden. Right? They're supposed to have someone that get everyone excited because they're not excited about Biden. So with Hillary, it was they didn't want overshadowing. They didn't want somebody, and so they picked Tim Kaine, who really even remembers that. With Kamala as the pick, it's supposed to be, this is who your real president's going to be. And Democrats are desperate to believe that people will be excited about that. Here's the problem that I think they face. Nobody's excited about that except for the liberal elites. And they are so out of touch. Remember, they also were sure that Donald Trump was going to get crushed. So I actually feel pretty good for our team, for our side, with Kamala as the candidate, because Democrats never learn from their mistakes, friends.
These people are crazy, okay? And this is what we're getting. And it's amazing the way Sleepy Joe buys into it. He buys into it like, oh, great. He doesn't know what he's doing. And now you have a sort of a mad woman, I call her, because she was so angry and such hatred with Justice Kavanaugh. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. She was the angriest of the group, and they were all angry. They were all radical left angry people. And they're angry because I beat them. Yeah. They still haven't forgotten. These are seriously ill people. But if you look at her record is a terrible record.
Terrible record. Radical left, angry people. I think that we are going to have quite a contest on our hands here, friends. Even though the country is going through a catastrophe, a large part of the catastrophe is just the reality of dealing with COVID. But there's also a serious component of this catastrophe that's the response and I would argue, and will continue to argue, the inept and overzealous, both inept and overzealous, two descriptors for government that you have to always remember. They're going to tell you what to do, with a ferocity and make you do it, and they're idiots. That's pretty much a definition for why we want to limit government and why we want to make sure that there are safeguards in place from the abuses of power that are inherent really in any government system. It's a question of degree. It's a question of severity. But Trump is right. He's right that they're leftists and that this is part of the Biden Kamala storyline. You're going to be told is that they're pragmatic moderates. Yeah, how? Does any sane person think the Green New Deal is a pragmatic moderate position? Does any sane person think that it's a middle-of-the-road position to have not just abortion all 9 months of a pregnancy, but that there should be taxpayer funding for it, and that we should continue to give hundreds of millions of dollars a year to Planned Parenthood? That's a middle-of-the-road position? No, these are just Democrat positions now. But the Democrats have gone, they're going to have quite a challenge here. They have gone far left, and they're going to try to convince Americans that being far left is actually being centrist. That they've moved the Overton window of our politics so much that they are somehow magically now not on team crazy. And I've got to tell you, they are on team crazy. I disagree. They are on team crazy. So that's where the president is going to have, I think, a lot of ability to score points with the voters who matter. Remember, there's so much of this people talking about what is perception? What do the American people want? What do they want to vote for? It really ends up being about what do a couple 100,000 people in a half a dozen different states think. Do they show up? And if they show up, who do they vote for? That's the difference maker. That's going to be the difference maker in this election. We're not going to have some big blowout. The blue states are going to stay blue. It's going to be just the contested states that once again are up for. I mean, of course, always the contested states are what matters. What I'm saying is I don't think you're going to see a major surprise where a state that we think of as anything other than belonging to one party or the other goes the other way. I don't think you're going to see that. As much as Democrats all want to believe Texas is going to go blue, no way. No way. Oh, what else is Joe Biden going to do? Play 14.
Everyone knows that if Biden gets in, this market's going to crash. He's going to build regulations, and his taxes, he's going to tax people $4 trillion. $4 trillion. That will destroy this economy, the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. $4 trillion in taxes.
That is going to hurt things, isn't it? The flight from cities that are already overtaxed that the Democrats think they're going to fix by taxing more, that's just a harbinger of things to come. If Democrats can do the federal level, they will. Can't believe we're losing our home that we never sold. That's what Deborah said when she found out she was the victim of home title theft, which is a crime that can actually cost you your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys find your information online, then they forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. You often won't find out about this until the eviction notice arrives. The usual identity theft services don't protect you from this, and the FBI is warning people that this is a crime on the rise. You need to take action today with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock creates a virtual barrier around your home's title. Simply go to HomeTitleLock.com and use promo code BUCK for 30 free days of protection. You can also check to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com. Use promo code BUCK. You'll get 30 free days of protection. Go check it out now. Speaking of major cities, how do Democrats think they're going to fix them? What are they going to do? I just told you that they are planning on doing big tax increases. So that's, shut down the economy largely for political reasons now. I mean, the continued shutdowns this is madness. This should not continue. This should not be allowed to continue. But they figure, well, the federal government will bail us out. What if the federal government doesn't? You know what they're planning to do? They're going to start raising taxes, taking more of your money at a time when the American people are already strapped. So we have the government pumping money into the system, and then people who are already not able to make ends meet are going to be told, well, you also have to pay higher taxes. This is not good. This is not healthy for an economy. This is not going to make us wealthier or better off. But how are you going to fix the deterioration in the cities? How are you going to fix Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco? Well, the mayor of Chicago has an idea. Play clip 5.
Those are the words of somebody who doesn't understand the first thing about local policing, doesn't understand the first thing about building authentic relationships with members of the community. Case in point is, look at the disastrous efforts of the federal government under this administration in Portland. It didn't help, it hurt. It exacerbated problems. I'm not letting that happen in my city. Yes, of course, we have our challenges, but the thing that the federal government is uniquely qualified to do is things like pass common sense gun reform, make sure that everybody has background checks, stop the availability of assault weapons. People that are on a no-fly list shouldn't be able to get weapons. The list goes on and on. The things that could really help cities to stop putting guns in the hands of criminals, this president has shown an absolute abject unwillingness to even discuss, let alone move on. So I need a leader in Washington, D.C. who is willing to take on the gun lobby and do what's right for our children in our cities. That is not President Trump. We need Joe Biden.
Yeah, sure you do. Let's unpack this, shall we? Why the focus for a mayor whose city is a cautionary tale of lawlessness, violence, murder, gangbangers shooting it out all the time, more bodies piling up in Chicago than in whole other large industrialized nations, and piling up in one weekend than other countries, entire countries will have in a weekend. Large countries. Why is that? Why is that happening? Oh, because we need an assault rifle ban. You know, I watched a few episodes. I couldn't get through anymore. I watched a few episodes of The West Wing because it's now available on Netflix. And it's just funny because it is a window or really a time machine back to the lifestyle liberalism of the 90s, where it was really just about gun control and feminism and worshiping unions. I mean, this is what the 90s were all about for liberals, but gun control in particular. And we've done this. We've run the experiments they wanted us to. We've banned. They say things like ban assault rifles. Does anyone want to just take a guess? I mean, how much of the violence in the city of Chicago involves assault rifles? I mean, I would place a monetary bet with somebody that it's less than 1%. But ban assault rifles. That's a talking point that Democrats say to make it seem like they're serious about stopping crime. Make it seem like they actually have ideas about this. More gun control. Yes, because gangbangers who will shoot up a funeral and hit over a dozen people, murder people in broad daylight at a funeral, when they find out that it's illegal to buy a gun without a background check, they're going to say, whoa, I'm just in this for the drive-bys. I don't want any of that heat from missing the background check. When you think through what they say, when you think through what the Democrats, what Lori Lightfoot says, it's stupid. Not going to make anyone safer. It's not going to make anything better. And this is a problem for them. If they had a media that wasn't completely, I don't know, I say in their pocket, but they're just, the media is the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is the media. It's the same thing, really. There's almost no separation whatsoever. I mean, they're just, DNC had on, CNN had on. DNC had on, CNN. It's the same thing. But if they actually had people that were there to bring facts and ask real questions, they'd say, the mayor of Chicago, you've already created a gun-free zone practically in Chicago, the strictest gun laws anywhere in the nation except for New York City. And you got guns flooding in. You're saying, well, they're coming from other states. Well, guess what? There's over 300 million guns already in circulation. So you really think that gangbangers aren't going to be able to buy guns illegally without a background check, even if you say that there's going to be mandatory background checks? Who are the only people that are stopped by the Lori Lightfoots of the world, the de Blasios of the world, these Democrat mayors. The only people that are stopped from getting firearms are people like me. If it were reasonable to get a firearm, and I'm still thinking about going through the process, although if it were, but it's been really shut down for a while now because of COVID, all the delays and everything. But they stopped me from getting a gun, so I can't defend my home. And there has been looting and rioting on my block, and I'm not allowed to defend my home. No. I'm subject to calling the police, who are subject to being told, whoa, you can't actually arrest that career criminal and throw him on the ground if he resists arrest and, use force. You can't do that. That looks bad. Don't you know about systemic oppression? You can't do that. Say, well, hold on. What does systemic oppression have to do with any of this? Whether a person is white, black, Hispanic, any race, they break the law, they should be held responsible, and the police should have the backing of political authorities to use force as necessary. Oh no, Buck, we have to start balancing these things out differently now in our public discourse. It's just all blather. It's all nonsense. You want Chicago to be safer? Federal resources going after gangs, which are already used at some level. But we just talked to the Attorney General about this yesterday with Operation Legend. Federal resources to go after the criminality is clearly helpful. And the mayor of Chicago should be thankful for this. She should be saying, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much to President Trump. And instead, she slaps him down and acts like he's the problem, that Trump is the issue. Or if you're Kamala Harris, you'll just say that he doesn't care about anybody. Play 16.
America is crying out for leadership. Yet we have a president who cares more about himself than the people who elected him. A president who is making every challenge we face even more difficult to solve. But here's the good news. We don't have to accept the failed government of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. In just 83 days, we have a chance to choose a better future.
Sure we do. Big day for the Trump team on foreign policy. Figure that we should spend a couple moments on this one. Here he is announcing a historic peace deal between Israel and the UAE that was brokered and assisted along by the Trump administration.
Well, thank you very much. This is very important. This is a big event, and I want to just congratulate all of the people standing behind me because they have done an incredible job. This is something that hasn't been done in more than 25 years. Just a few moments ago, I hosted a very special call with two friends, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates, where they agreed to finalize a historical peace agreement. Everybody said this would be impossible. And as you know, Mohammed is one of the great leaders of the Middle East. After 49 years, Israel and the United Arab Emirates will fully normalize their diplomatic relations. They will exchange embassies and ambassadors and begin cooperation across the board and on a broad range of areas, including tourism, education, healthcare, trade, and security. This is a truly historic moment. Not since the Israel-Jordan peace treaty was signed more than 25 years ago has so much progress been made towards peace in the Middle East. By uniting two of America's closest and most capable partners in the region, something which said could not be done, this deal is a significant step towards building a more peaceful, secure, and prosperous Middle East.
There you have it. Now, this has been trending in this direction a little bit for a while. Let's look at this for a moment as just a general foreign policy issue, and then we'll talk about the Trump campaign, the Trump team, and what this means for them. The Obama administration was doing everything it could to placate Iran and clear an eventual Iranian path to nuclear power status. I know the libs always argue about this, but that's the truth, okay? Iran was getting richer, more enmeshed, more entrenched in the international financial community, allowing to build up all of its conventional military capabilities, allowed to continue using its proxies and spreading terror all throughout the Middle East. And at the end of it, they're still going to have all the know-how and facilities necessary to just be unstoppable in their quest to get nuclear weapons. So that meant that even some of remember, Iran is the Shia, the biggest Shia Muslim state in the world. Gosh, we used to talk about Islam on this show and Islamic issues and terrorism and jihad and all this stuff all the time. Remember that? I first got into the radio business and got into media, and you had the rise of, you had the Syrian civil war and the rise of ISIS and U.S. operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and ISIS's export of terror all over the world. You had ISIS franchises popping up in Somalia and Nigeria and Egypt and all over the place. It was Afghanistan. I mean, there were ISIS franchises and we used to spend so much time. That was the primary national security challenge, and it just faded to a point where now I can't even remember the last time I had to say radical Islam or jihadism on air of any kind. I know this is a bit of an aside. This is a little soliloquy I'm doing, although I guess it's on radio. So, but this is a soliloquy. No, you could do a soliloquy on radio, on stage, on radio. That makes sense. But yeah, this was something that we used to talk about all the time. I remember going into pretty in-depth discussions on the original Saturday show, OSS, about the difference between Shia and Sunni and the history of different great Islamic battles and all that. This was such a more of a part of, and now in the Middle East, we're like, we don't need the oil. And as long as there's not anybody trying to blow up a plane, and we're going to be like, you guys do your thing. I mean, we've had a big shift away from the Middle East. And I think that's a good thing. I'll also say there's some pretty prominent conservatives out there gave me a little bit of a hard time. They tried to, at least, when I was saying we don't want a further military intervention in Syria. The Kurds are not all going to die. Everyone needs to calm down. And I was right. That was a couple of years ago. I remember I debated on the main stage at CPAC with who's the guy, kind of a big guy over at the Washington Post. I don't remember his name. But anyway, we debated on the main stage. And nice guy. I'm not forgetting his name. Mark Thiessen. But we debated this issue, and he was send the troops wherever there's bad guys. That was anywhere in the world, wherever there's bad guys, we got to send troops. And I was like, we've been doing a lot of that. Let's not do that. Let's pull troops out of Syria as much as we can, at least as soon as we can. And I think that was certainly the correct point of view. I also think the Trump administration has been unfortunately stopped from pulling the plug on U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan, or at least the active duty deployment of thousands and thousands of troops there, and that's a shame because we need to stop and let the rest of the world do what it does as much as we can, where it doesn't affect U.S. interests. We have learned lessons about trying to remold the Middle East, everything else, and the best thing is to say, okay, who are our allies, who are our enemies? Work with our allies, marginalize, undermine, and when necessary, use force against our enemies, but only when absolutely necessary and as a last result, and try to get the regional players to play more in their region, to have a bigger role. I'm not somebody who spends a lot of time talking about the foreign policy interests of Israel because I prefer to spend time talking about the domestic interests of the United States. But this is good for the region, and this is, for me, more importantly, well, I shouldn't say more importantly, but more on the radar for what we're all looking at here in this country. It just goes to show you that the Trump team, for all the talk about how, Trump is going to destroy NATO. Oh, my God. No, he's not. Okay, that didn't happen. Trump is going to start a war with North Korea. Trump is going to start a war with Iran. All this stuff that we always hear. Nah, didn't happen. Now, the North Korean diplomacy did not bear fruit, really. I know some of you are going to say, Buck, but the missiles stopped. Yeah, but we were hoping for more than that. And it's been a few years here, and it really hasn't. And look, it was a long bomb. Whoops, probably not the right term, but it was a long bomb in the end zone, and they didn't pick it off and run it back for a touchdown, but we didn't get what we were looking for on that one. But remember, the way that the Trump team has approached this is not to make blunders and to take to do outreach or to take action in areas where the blowback possibility or the risk of losses on our side are very minor, very small. They're not non-existent, but very small. You see that Trump has been able to marginalize Iran from the international community, pull this out of the disastrous JCPOA, right, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Trump managed to do all of these things, and he was supposed to be the weakest of all the stuff that he brought to the table as commander-in-chief. The area the Democrats were so certain he was going to be the least competent. I mean, and there were a lot of places, but the main place was on foreign policy. They really thought that that's where they were going to be able to just hammer him. And you compare the first 4 years of Trump foreign policy to the first 4 years of Obama foreign policy, no question, Trump has been better. And not better because I like it more. Not better because, ooh, I want to root for, yay, Trump. No, Trump has been better because U.S. interests have been more supported. Americans are not dying for policies, for strategies that no one can even really articulate, at least certainly not in the numbers they were. And we're not extending ourselves in places where we shouldn't be, and also trusting entities that are really enemies of the United States. Remember, the Obama foreign policy in the Middle East was to get a foreign policy legacy for Obama. They were willing to do anything else to appease Iran. So Syria policy collapsed, and the whole region caught up in flames, and Iraq was a complete mess, and the Islamic State made it, 40, 50 miles from Baghdad at one point? A total disaster. And you're not going to hear anybody talking about this, but Trump foreign policy is pretty good. We got our own stuff to deal with. We'll be nice to our friends. We're going to slap down our enemies, and we're not going to involve ourselves in stuff that isn't really all about us. And if we can bring two, responsible parties together like the UAE and Israel and to do good things, great. And they did. Put a win up on the board. But now let's get back to winning the election.